Okay, today let's begin section 1.5, adding integers. We're going to spend a couple of days on this section because being able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide integers is very important to everything you're going to do the rest of the time that you have math classes in high school and in college. So let's make sure that we understand it very well. Get your materials and let's get started on working the problems. Some of this you had last year, so some of it will be familiar. And so just bear with me. If you know the rules, then take the notes and get ready to do the problems and just make sure that you understand what it is you're supposed to do to add them. So the first thing we're going to do in adding integers is we're going to add integers with the same sign. To add integers with the same sign, all you're going to do is add them and give the sum, or the result, the answer, the same sign as the integers. Remember, if you need to slow down in order to get all the notes, just pause the video for a minute or two, take the notes, and then come back to listen so that you make sure you're also listening to the lesson. So to add integers with the same sign, add them and give the sum the same sign as the integers. So when you're adding positives, your two positives, you're going to get a positive answer. And when you add two negatives, you're going to get a negative answer. So positive plus a positive equals a positive, and a negative plus a negative equals a negative. Now, we're going to look at it on a number line because for some people using a number line is going to be helpful, and it will come in handy as you start to go through these a little bit more just to have an idea of how to do it, but then we'll get back to the rules and we'll work on them that way as well. So when adding a positive number, you're going to move to the right on the number line. And when you add a negative number, you're going to move to the left on the number line. So let's take a look at our first number line. Let's go ahead and fill in our number line as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. And to answer the problem 2 plus 3, we're going to start with a dot on the 2, and then remember when we're adding a positive number like 3, we're going to move to the right on the number line. So we're going to move 1, 2, 3 to the right. So as we know, we learned way back in the first grade, 2 plus 3 equals 5. Now let's look at negative 2 plus negative 3. Let's fill in our number line. We've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. Fill in your number line. This time, we're starting with negative 2. So we'll put a dot on the negative 2. And when you add a negative number, notice that I put the negative number in parentheses. Anytime you have a negative number after a plus sign or after a minus sign, you need to put it in parentheses. So we're going to start with negative 2, and when you add a negative number, you move to the left. So we'll move 1, 2, 3 to the left, and that means that negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. Now we're going to move on to the next rule, looking at the number line first. So let's go ahead and mark our number line. We'll have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. This time, we're going to start on negative 2, and because we want to add a positive 3, we're going to move to the right, so 1, 2, 3 to the right. So negative 2 plus positive 3 equals 1. For some of you, it will be helpful for you to have number lines with you so that if you're having a difficult time with the rules themselves, you can use the number line, or you can at least think about the number line to see if that will help you. Next, you have a couple of practice problems. I want you to pause the video and work the practice problems. And when you finish those practice problems, come back and we'll continue with the lesson. Okay, we're moving on to page 2 of your notes. So you can just put a 2 down at the bottom. And let's look at some examples. Using our rules of adding same sign, we know that we just add the integers and give the sum or the answer to an addition problem the same sign as the two integers. So we're adding a positive plus a positive. 4 plus 7 is 11. Because I added 2 positives, they're positive. Number 2, we're going to add 2 negatives. Negative 4 plus negative 7. Again, it's 11, but both of them were negative, so we'll make the answer or the sum a negative. Number 3, negative 5 plus negative 10 is negative 15. And number 4, negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. So the only thing you have to remember here is you're adding, just like you learned to add way back in the 1st and 2nd grade, but if you have 2 negatives, the sum or the answer is going to be negative. There are 2 practice problems. Take just a minute, pause your video, work your practice problems, and come back so we can complete the lesson. Okay, let's move to adding different signs. When you add different signs, while it was pretty easy on the number line, the rule itself can be a little confusing, so you really have to show your work and think it through. When you add different signs, what you're going to do is subtract and give the result, or the answer, the sign of the integer with the greatest absolute value. Now, that seems really hard. Most of the time, I'm not going to say anything about absolute value when I'm talking about that. I'm going to say, give it the sign of the one you had the most of. So if you had more negatives, the answer is going to be negative. If you had more positives, the answer is going to be positive. So let's look at the examples. We've got 15 plus negative 4, so we're adding a positive and a negative. So I'm going to take them and I'm going to subtract the 2 integers. So 15 minus 4, and I know that 15 minus 4 is 11. And I want to look back. I have more positives than negatives. I have 15 positives and 4 negatives, so my answer is going to be positive. And it's positive because there are more positives. Okay, positive because there are more positives than negatives. Number 2, once again, we're adding a negative and a positive, so we're going to subtract the 2 numbers. So we have 15 minus 4. Once again, it's 11, but I want to look back and I see that I have more negatives than I do positives. Up here, I had more positives, so let's circle those numbers, the one we have the most of, or the one with the greatest absolute value. Here, because I have more negatives, my answer is going to be negative. If you need to, try it on a number line and see how it works out. But it's going to be negative because we have more negatives. All right, number 3, let's look at it. Negative 8 plus 7. First of all, let's circle the negative 8 because we have more negatives. So we already know that our answer is going to be negative. We're going to take the 2 numbers, 8 minus 7 equals 1, and we're going to give it a negative. And it's negative because we had more negatives. This is not hard, but if you don't learn the rule, it's going to become difficult, and you're going to have a harder time doing your pre-algebra. So make sure you learn the rule. Subtract it and give it the result, the sign of the one that you had the most of. If you had more negatives, the answer is negative. If you had more positives, the answer is positive. Okay, let's take a look at the next page of your notes. This time we're going to add more than 2 integers. Okay, let's add more than 2 integers. First of all, we need to know what a couple of things are. We need to know what opposites are, and we've talked about that a little bit. Opposites just mean that they are two numbers with the same absolute value, but different signs. Two numbers with the same absolute value, but different signs. An integer and its opposite are also called additive inverses. Keep in mind the properties that we learned last week are also going to apply. So the commutative, associative, and identity properties are also going to apply to integers. So let's think about it. In example 1, we have 6 plus -9 plus +9. If you think about your inverse property, and we said that if you add a number and its inverse, you get 0. So we know that 6 -9 plus 9 is going to be 0, and 6 plus 0 is 6. So we have to keep in mind that because of the inverse property, these two numbers, when you add them together, you get 0. Let's look at number 2, -9 plus 16 plus -10. The easiest way to do this problem is we don't see any inverse property here, so the easiest thing for us to do is to put all of our negatives together. Notice I'm putting parentheses around that -10 and all of our positives together. That way we can take these two numbers, -9 plus -10 is -19, and now we can add it to 16. And what we're going to do is go back to our rule for adding opposite signs, adding different signs. Remember that when we do that, we're going to subtract. So 19 minus 16, we're going to look at the one we have the most of, and we're going to get -3. -3. You have some practice problems below. I want you to take some time, pause the video, try to work those problems. Take some time to think about any questions that you might have. List those questions so we can talk about them in class tomorrow before we get started on some activities. Again, we're going to spend a couple of days on this, but you need to try your best to understand these notes before you come to class tomorrow.